When we're talking to patients about nutrition and health, people are often looking for big overhauls and big changes. What's exciting about this study is that it's just a small substitution, changing one type of milk for another type of milk and seeing a benefit. So it's not going to add cost or burden to your patients, but it could see a real benefit to their cognitive health in the long term.
Mild cognitive impairment, these participants all had mild cognitive impairments with self-reported memory difficulties. And they reported and demonstrated improvements in memory, improvements in cognition over that time period, indicating that there's something in milk generally, and probably something in A2 milk specifically that helps to improve cognition in that group.
I'm Dr. Emma Beckett. I'm a food and nutrition scientist with FOODiQ Global. We're an end-to-end nutrition and food research, education and communication company. One of the major proteins in milk is called beta-casein, and it comes in two different forms, the A1 and the A2 form. They're very similar. There's only one amino acid difference, which means they get digested differently in the body. In traditional milk, you have a combination of A1 and A2 protein. In A1 protein-free milk, also called A2 milk, you have cows that have been selected just to produce that A2 protein without the A1 protein. This has been of interest for a long time based on the fact that it seems to be digested better in some people. So fewer gastrointestinal responses for people who feel like they respond to milk, but they're not necessarily lactose intolerant. Lactose intolerance is common, but a lot of people who think that they're lactose intolerant are actually responding to the A1 protein in milk rather than the lactose itself. The role of diet and nutrition in cognitive function is an evolving area. So it's very well established that things like nutritional deficiencies play an important role in cognitive health, and so nutrition is important in supporting that. But we're learning more every day about how the other components in food, like the bioactive compounds, influence cognition in the long term. So everyone's going to have heard of the gut-brain axis, and we know that what goes on in the gut has a big influence on what goes on in the brain and vice versa. But we don't know yet what all the mechanisms are that do that communication, and this kind of research is teaching us more about that.
My name is Professor Stephen Robinson, and I work at RMIT. It's a part-time role now because I'm semi-retired, and I work as a research professor in psychology. The study was based on a premise that people who drink A2 milk would normally show some degree of cognitive benefit, because we found that in the past when we've done studies on children and adults that have a milk intolerance, they show a significant improvement in cognition, and that's associated with an improvement in oxidative stress markers, particularly increases in glutathione, and also a decrease in inflammation. This time we wanted to look at elderly people who don't have any intolerance to milk. So these are like regular people. And we still had the same hypothesis that we'd see a change in glutathione levels and that would be associated with an improvement in cognition. What we found was actually that we did get an improvement in cognition, both with A1 protein-free milk, or A2 milk as commonly known, but also in regular milk. And we found that that wasn't associated with an increase in glutathione at all. And that was the surprise. This was a double-blind study, so neither the participants nor the researchers knew what type of milk the participants were getting. So they were either getting skim milk powder that was from regular milk, which contains both A1 and A2 protein, or skim milk powder that is just A2 protein. Now, their job was to mix it up every day and have it twice daily in the amounts of 200 mils in the morning, 200 mils in the evening. And so they were allocated to two groups. In the end, we had 88 participants, average age of 69. And before they began the study, we did a washout with just rice milk, so they drank no dairy, no milk whatsoever. We did a very detailed analysis of their bloods, a lot of blood markers from inflammation in particular. We also took measurements of their cognitive performance, 3 different measures, subtle cognitive impairment, auditory verbal learning test, and the MOCA. We also did a quality of life survey so that we measured how satisfied they were with various aspects of their life, hand grip strength, whole range of things. Then they underwent 3 months of taking their milk every day, and at the end of the 3 months we administered all those tests again. Then we analysed the group data to see whether there's a difference between the groups, and also a difference between baseline and at the end of the 3-month period. What astounded us is that we found that both groups showed a very significant improvement in quite a number of the measures, particularly on all 3 levels of measures of cognition. Quality of life was really massively improved, and we saw improvements in hand grip strength in one of the groups, and we noticed that one of the groups was performing better than the other, but we didn't know what it was until it was unblinded. And when it was unblinded, we were a little bit relieved, I suspect, to find that the group that was performing the best of the 2 was the A1 protein-free group. But they both showed, it's important to stress, both groups showed a significant improvement on all those measures I've mentioned. We don't know yet what the reason for that improvement is. What surprised us as well is we had no increase in glutathione levels, so it didn't seem to be associated with an improvement in antioxidant potential, although we do need to look further to look at other markers to be sure about that. What we did see, though, was that there was an increase in vitamin D3 levels in the blood over that period of three months. This group was quite deficient in vitamin D to start with, which is normal for an elderly group of people, even in Australia. And they improved over that period, presumably from the milk intake. Vitamin D3 is associated with cognitive performance, so it could have been one of the reasons why they improved, but there's a lot of other possibilities that we haven't looked at, like the B complex group, for example. Other measures that might be related to antioxidant potential that we didn't look at. What we could put our finger on, which is quite unlike any previous studies that involved A1 protein-free milk, is that we saw improvements in cognition that were independent of inflammation. So in the past, we've looked at vulnerable groups that suffer from a milk intolerance, and we thought that inflammation was a big factor in their cognitive performance. It probably was. But this group had no inflammation, and the inflammatory markers were the same at the beginning of the study as they were at the end. So this opens up a window into understanding that milk has other benefits that are over and above anything that might be related to an inflammatory component. And it probably isn't related to oxidative stress either, improvements, but we don't know for sure. What we can say for certain is that milk is beneficial for elderly people with a similar profile. That is healthy, mild cognitive impairment. These participants all had mild cognitive impairments with self-reported memory difficulties. And they reported and demonstrated improvements in memory, improvements in cognition over that time period, indicating that there's something in milk generally, and probably something in A2 milk specifically that helps to improve cognition in that group. It was a study that involved 2 different universities, one in Shanghai and one in Jiangquin in China. It was led by Professor Sun, who's been involved in previous studies looking at A1 protein-free milk. And in fact, this was building on some work on a study she led, which had shown improvements in people with intolerance to milk. So this is the next step, to look at those that aren't intolerant of milk. Very talented group of people. I was involved in analysing the data, and I wrote the paper. A2 Milk Corporation funded the research, but to their credit, they really kept an arm's distance. They did want to have a look at the protocol to start with, to make sure that it was a rigorous study, because they're putting money into it. They wanted to make sure it was well spent. But once that was done, they really took a step back and allowed a lot of independence, and particularly in the writing stage, I was able to write the paper with no interference or oversight from A2. The paper was published in the Journal of Nutrition, Health and Aging, which is an A1 journal. The findings are quite impactful in the sense that they have relevance to pretty much anyone who's elderly, and particularly if they might be vitamin D deficient. They show that milk in general and A2 milk specifically have benefits on cognition, but also the activities of daily life. So we saw improvements in sleep, we saw improvements in ability to organise finances, engage socially, plan the day. So there's a memory was also noted as an improvement. Now these people had mild cognitive impairment. Mild cognitive impairment, as many of the viewers would know, is a precursor in many cases to development of Alzheimer's disease. Not everybody that has MCI will go on to develop Alzheimer's, and some will even improve again. But it is a stepping stone, and so we do want to know whether or not longer-term treatment, well not treatment, but drinking of milk can improve cognition or delay the cognitive decline that we normally see in MCI. So one of the studies that we'd like to do in the future is a longer study, perhaps for a year, to track people over that period of time to see how their cognition goes. Does it stabilise? Does it get better? Does it continue to decline? We also want to look much more closely at the blood work of these participants to understand what factors might be behind these improvements that we're seeing. And in terms of impact generally, we've already had a huge response from the public and the media, because they're obviously interested in this because it has so much relevance to such a large proportion of society.
This study showed that A1 protein-free milk improved cognitive function, quality of life, and muscle strength above and beyond the improvements seen with regular milk. This probably seems like a very simple outcome, but that's really important in clinical practice because we can make one small change in people's diets that can potentially support their cognitive health into later life. And that's a really great thing.
If we think about the clinical carers that might be interested in this work, I would say the most important group will be just the GPs. They're seeing patients on a daily basis. Many of them are elderly and are starting to complain of memory problems. Some of them may be showing up with depleted vitamin D3 levels in their serum. It's a very easy intervention. Just a glass of milk a day isn't a lot to ask of the patient. They're not popping pills, and it's going to be beneficial. It's certainly or neutral at the very least in terms of its impact. Gerontologists are another group that should be considering this because they're seeing people coming in with memory complaints, with mild cognitive impairment. And again, there's not a lot of drugs out there that can do much to touch mild cognitive impairment. So a simple intervention like milk, which may simply be addressing nutritional deficits, is going to likely have a benefit.
When we're talking to patients about nutrition and health, people are often looking for big overhauls and big changes. What's exciting about this study is that it's just a small substitution, changing one type of milk for another type of milk and seeing a benefit. So it's not going to add cost or burden to your patients, but it could see a real benefit to their cognitive health in the long term.